Hello, I'm Jonasz Rawiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. As always, I hope you enjoy the journey. As the war in Ukraine is well into its fourth year, Russia is no longer fighting alone. From the trenches near Bakhmut to the skies over Donetsk, the Kremlin's arsenal is increasingly stamped "Made in China" or shipped courtesy of Pyongyang. North Korea is no longer just a rogue state on the sidelines. It is, in fact, a combatant. With up to 30,000 troops reportedly heading to the Russian front lines and millions of artillery shells already sent, Kim Jong-un's regime is now one of the most active military supporters of Vladimir Putin's invasion. Meanwhile, Beijing plays a more subtle but no less pivotal role. So without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Moscow has been very keen on finding new friends after the West struck back against it with sanctions. China and Iran are the most notable examples, but North Korea is a close third. The two countries share a deep history dating all the way back to the Soviet Union, so it comes as no surprise that Russian diplomacy is making inroads with the North Koreans. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's recent visit to Pyongyang for a second round of strategic negotiations was meant to highlight these tightening relations. Lavrov acknowledged North Korea's help in pushing back the Ukrainian incursion into the Kursk region.
You described our new basic strategic dialogue as a solid foundation for an invincible military brotherhood.
According to reports, more than 10,000 North Korean soldiers were sent to Kursk to bolster Russian efforts in the region. It is difficult to say how impactful these reinforcements were. The Ukrainian sources say the North Koreans suffered heavy casualties. Following a visit by Vladimir Putin to North Korea in 2024, the two countries have been closely aligning their positions. The two sides also signed a strategic partnership which covers many sectors, from political cooperation to trade and even security.
And now let's zone in on the east-splaining portion of our show. China and Russia have become extremely close partners since the latter's invasion of Ukraine. One of the ways in which this political alliance shows itself is the variety of formats in which the two countries work together.
Although a sideline meeting between the Chinese president and the Russian foreign minister is not out of the ordinary, it was seen as one of the highlights of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in China. Lavrov has recently been busy with meeting with Russia's closest allies such as North Korea, so a meeting with Xi Jinping was in order. The two reportedly discussed political ties and preparations for Vladimir Putin's upcoming visit to China. The meeting took place on the sidelines of the SCO. This is a format established in 2001 by China and Russia along with several Central Asian countries. It is one of the main avenues for these countries to work on Central Asian trade relations, which have been growing in importance over the last decades. The summit is also meant to be a forum for working on counter-terrorism measures and widely understood mutual development. The SCO has been expanded twice throughout its history, in 2017 by including India and Pakistan, and in 2023 by adding Iran. There are also observer states like Afghanistan and Mongolia, and so-called dialogue partners like Turkey and Saudi Arabia.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. From microchips and drones to dual-use goods and industrial components, Chinese exports are helping Moscow keep its war machine alive under the weight of Western sanctions. This isn't just a story about battlefield logistics. There is a new geopolitical alignment at play here. China and North Korea, two authoritarian neighbors, long wary of each other and of becoming entangled in Russia's mess, are now enabling the Kremlin in ways that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. Their motivations differ. Beijing wants to keep Russia afloat without burning bridges with the West, while Pyongyang seeks prestige, cash and battlefield experience. But the effect is the same. Ukraine is being bled by a trilateral axis of autocracy. This is the official militarization of a friendship built on shared autocratic tendencies, mutual isolation, and a deep burning hatred of Western norms. North Korea isn't just backing Russia politically, it is, in fact, bleeding for it. According to Ukrainian intelligence, up to 30,000 additional troops may be on their way. And these aren't the usual starving conscripts either. Russian officials describe them as disciplined, adaptable, and most chillingly, useful. They have been learning fast, especially when it comes to drone warfare, skills their southern neighbor, South Korea, hasn't had the chance to develop under peacetime conditions. That battlefield experience, that is a gift from Vladimir to Kim. And what does Kim get in return, besides military funerals in a Russian oblast? Well, let's count the ways, shall we? First, immediate economic relief: oil, wheat, fertilizers. Second, deeper strategic leverage over China, which now has to compete for North Korea's loyalty. And third, and let's not pretend this isn't the big one, access to Russian military technology. Pyongyang has already built a crude nuclear arsenal. Now it wants guidance systems, satellite support, and long-range delivery platforms. Russia is opening the toolbox. This is the new world order. Railroads, sea lanes, and artillery exchanges, all crisscrossing old Cold War boundaries. Russia has revived a train line between the two countries. Cargo is flowing. Coal, seafood, rare earths, you name it. Even seafood is now weaponized in the name of strategic autonomy, you see. And while NATO draws red lines and debates training missions, North Korea is delivering boots, bullets, and blood. Because by embedding itself in Russia's war effort, Pyongyang has found relevance again. And so, here we are. A war that was supposed to end Ukraine's sovereignty is now reshaping the global order. Make no mistake, this is about more than just this particular war anymore. Because what's being built here isn't just a war alliance, it's an alternative world order, and it is learning how to win. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Marcin Grabowski, Director at the Center for International Studies and Development of the Jagiellonian University. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, good to see you today.
So how would you describe the relationship between Russia and North Korea today?
Definitely, they have evolved significantly since the war in Ukraine started in 2022. As if you look at the past, Russia was even joining certain sanctions that were aimed against North Korea. But then North Korea became an important partner. Hence, Russia decided that it would be better to have support from North Korea, especially North Korea gathered significant arsenal, significant amounts of munitions that could be delivered to Russia relatively easily. And of course, being isolated from almost every country in the world, including China, since 2018, North Korea really needed this support as its economic situation became really drastic, I would say, recently. Hence, Russian support in different areas would be also important, or was important to North Korea, to Kim Jong-un. That's twofold. Yeah. So on the one hand, North Korea needs technological support. It is quite advanced in certain systems, but certain areas like re-entry mechanisms, atmospheric re-entry mechanisms from missiles are beyond the capacity of North Korean nuclear technology, like precise guided munitions in certain areas, etc. So this is where Russia could be very important. Of course, North Korea has been suffering from energy crisis. It's pretty scarce of resources, especially oil, gas. So Russian deliveries of oil could be important. Hence, we got to the point where both countries agreed to cooperate much closer, signing this comprehensive strategic partnership deal in June last year. And we got to the point where Korea re-expressed its unconditional support to Russia, of course, remembering that the country has sent its troops to Russia as well.
So it's unconditional support, it was expressed openly. Would you say that this suggests that this bromance between Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un could be rather difficult to disentangle?
I'm not sure whether it's difficult, but for the moment, those two countries have mutual interests in keeping this relations relatively close. As for allies that are of course different size, that have different strategic goals, but they're united by the will to undermine American position, as Kim Jong-un perceives the US as well as American allies in the region. That was also expressed recently during Lavrov's visit to South Korea and Japan, as a danger, as a threat to North Korean existence. So, in this context, North Korea benefits from the alliance, and for Russia, it's important. Russia invites or expects North Korea to deliver, to send more troops to Russia, engineering troops. That could be important in its summer offensive, demining support troops as well. So these are groups that could be useful for Russia. North Korea, of course, has its doubts, but at the same time, I presume this is what keeps the Romans, as you say, together. So for the moment, I don't expect significant changes here, unless very important step would happen. So Russia would get into a deal and then partnership relations with the West, especially with the United States. That is, of course, a challenge at this point.
At this stage, it looks unlikely, actually, even though initially that was the plan, to get Russia on the side of the West in a potential conflict with China, which brings us to my next question, the relationship with China. Now, that is a bit more complicated for Russia, isn't it?
Absolutely. Shanghai Cooperation Organization foreign ministers meeting that was hosting Sergei Lavrov recently. That's, of course, was a step towards the summit visit of Putin in early September this year. But SCO is the premier example of this complicated relations between Russia and China, relations that are by default competitive, at least, if not hostile. Both countries compete for influence in Central Asia, especially. And SCO, initially created as Shanghai 5 in 1996, then renamed SCO in 2001, was an attempt of the Soviet Russian authorities, Russian in 1996, to reduce these tensions and keep control over this region and over its minor brother, that was China, or at least this is how it was perceived. In reality, SCO became a tool for China more than for Russia. And all those former problems, challenges were still there. I mentioned Soviet Union because this was the time when they were really afraid of China. They built parallel railway line parallel to Trans-Siberian Railway called Baikal-Amur line in case Chinese would attack. And then we got into early 90s. Of course, China and Soviet Union were enemies in the 80s. That's been changing during Gorbachev era. And then my impression is that China was using Russia whenever problems appeared. And that is why SU was created in 1996, so more or less at the time when we observe a third Taiwan Strait crisis, so relations between China and the United States get into its nadir. There were other problems, so apart from this competition for resources in Central Asia, China has been winning in the early 21st century, demonopolizing the area. There was the issue of illegal Chinese migration to Russian Far East, to Siberian region. of course, Russian anti-migration policy, multiply numbers of Chinese that crossed the border. And there was kind of ancient, I would say, or long-lasting geopolitical rivalry over the heartland, as we would still call it, quoting Halford Mackinder. Yeah, so all those elements make Russia and China rather competitors, if not enemies. Of course, Russia is much weaker. It's 10 times smaller than China. Its military budget, even now, it's just half of China's budget, approximately. 10 times smaller in terms of population.
Do you think is going to act in the near future? Because we've had reports that Mr. Wang Yi told European Union officials that they cannot afford to have Russia losing the war in Ukraine. There is evidence of Chinese equipment being used, for example, in the manufacture of Russian drones, which are being used against Ukraine. And also we've had a start warning from one of NATO generals who suggested that if there is a conflict in Taiwan, then Russia could serve as a distraction in Central and Eastern Europe, potentially. Do you think this could happen? To what extent do you think Russia has anything to say on where this relationship actually goes in the near future?
There used to be an unlikely option for me, but of course, China has strategic interests in not allowing US to win the war. This is their perception. That Ukraine by Western countries, but especially by the United States in military terms, and of course the numbers confirm it. US is the premier provider of weapons to Ukraine in those couple of years during the war. Of course, there were some changes during Trump administration recently, but at the same time, Russia is a problem to China in the longer run. So what we can, or what China can do, is naturally support Russia to the extent to get a peace that will be, maybe if not victory, that will prove that Russia and China are strong enough to oppose the United States. Why? Because otherwise, China's position in East Asia, Northeast Asia, would be seriously undermined, and that also would be the issue of Taiwan. Russian aggression against Ukraine proved that Taiwan is very difficult to be captured. If Russia, having very easy access to Ukraine and being portrayed as a second military power globally, couldn't reach its goals in Ukraine, why could China do it in case of Taiwan, especially if Taiwan receives larger support from the US than Ukraine received? Yet there is still Taiwan Strait. China has no capabilities of invading Taiwan. It has capabilities to destroy it to large extent, but of course Taiwan can be prepared better and better. So that would be a very bad communique to China.
Marcin Grabowski was a guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you for your invitation, and goodbye.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a curated selection of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. Azerbaijan is not giving up when it comes to seeking justice for the crash of an Azerbaijan airline plane last year. The country is reportedly preparing documents to hand over to international courts.
Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev says that although more than half a year has passed since the incident, the country has not received a clear response on the matter from Russian authorities. Baku claims that Russia is to blame for the crash, as according to an investigation, a Russian air defense system mistakenly targeted the plane in question amid a reported Ukrainian drone attack. The Russian side continues to reply to formal inquiries from Azerbaijan by saying that its own investigation is still ongoing. Putin himself offered his condolences for the crash, but did not admit Russian responsibility. The incident has been a black mark on otherwise close relations between Baku and Moscow. The Azerbaijani president has even gone so far as to accuse Russia of suppressing evidence and criticize Vladimir Putin for not openly admitting Russia's role.
Independent news outlet Możem Objaśnić says that censorship in Russian prisons is being tightened. Inmates are apparently having their access to foreign literature restricted.
Russian prisons have a reputation for being some of the harshest and most isolated in the world. Now, however, it seems that Russian authorities are looking to make prisoners' lives even more miserable. How? With a ban on foreign books and literature in foreign languages. This ban is supposed to range from language study materials all the way to simple mainstream novels. Prison censors are reportedly eager to tighten controls over what inmates are even able to read. Books have been banned from prisons not just for authors from foreign countries, but also because the censors did not like the way the cover looked. Some books by Russian authors are withheld without any explanations. Some prisons go so far as to reject books sent by family members or supporters solely because of their supposed perceived effects on the inmate's, quote, psycho-emotional state.
Speaking of censorship, Russian authorities are also looking to crack down on social media. Vladimir Putin has reportedly instructed his government to introduce new restrictions against foreign messaging apps.
Putin is continuing his conflict with what he has labeled as unfriendly countries, according to the Ukrainian intelligence service. In a new directive, he has called for limiting the use of foreign developed communication services and software across the country. Ukrainian intelligence warns that the American social media giant Meta is one of the primary targets, with WhatsApp likely being on the possible ban list. Russia already declared the tech giant who runs Facebook and Instagram in addition to WhatsApp as an extremist organization in 2022. The latter app is the only service by the company that has not yet been blocked in Russia, though last year Russian officials did float the idea of getting rid of it in 2025. The fate of Telegram, on the other hand, remains uncertain. All Russian officials have been ordered to switch to the Max social media platform, which supposedly has access to almost every crevice of a user's device.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.